In this video, I will be summarizing and evaluating the book Raising the Bar and Closing the Gap by Richard Dufour, Rebecca Dufour, Robert Eaker, and Gail Karnick. To do that, I'm going to be highlighting and summarizing a few main points from the book. The author's aim of this text is to inform teaching professionals how to go about what to do when our students aren't learning, and how to deepen the learning of the students who are reaching proficiency. The authors explore this by looking at schools across the country who have been able to do this in their own classrooms. So let's get started. Schools interested in helping students who are struggling must lay out a collective plan. This shouldn't be held to the responsibility of the individual teacher, but the program as a whole. To do this effectively, schools should engage in PLCs, or professional learning communities. PLC, simply put, is when teachers all get together and talk about how their classrooms are going. These should be multi-layered, meaning it's not just a meeting with, let's say, fourth grade teachers, but different grade levels. Teachers can share how they have helped struggling students and different techniques that have worked for them to help all their students achieve proficiency. It is important to make sure that you are preparing your students for the next grade level, so this is another reason that it is important to meet with more than just your grade. This way, you can talk about how to prepare them for the next teacher's class. In short, professional learning communities are a place for intervention, a place to come up with a plan on how to fix what is going wrong in student learning. The authors laid out a multi-step framework to create effective intervention based on the learning process. Step 1. Identify an essential outcome all students must learn in each content area at each grade level during the school year and during each unit of instruction. Simply put, plan ahead. As a teacher, you cannot play it by ear. You must think ahead of time about what you want your students to learn and how you are going to teach it effectively so they learn it proficiently. Step 2. Create common pacing guides and curriculum maps each teacher will follow. After making the initial list of things you need to teach, plan when this is going to take place. Set up a sequence that makes sense and gives the students enough time with each unit. Consult other members in your professional learning community to ensure that all students are on the same page and no one is unfairly ahead, behind, or learning completely different things. Step 3. Develop multiple common formative assessments. Along the way in any given lesson, there should be assessments checking in on the student's progress. This way, you can assess if the students are learning what you have intended for them to learn. These assessments should be made with your professional learning community team to ensure that you all have the same goals for what the main points of what the students should be learning are. Step 4. Establish a target score all students must achieve to demonstrate proficiency in each skill on each common formative assessment. Teams should create a benchmark score ahead of time on what they expect their students to be able to achieve in order to demonstrate proficiency. For example, a 75% or higher could be used to show that they know enough in order to move on to the next topic. Step 5. Administer common assessments and analyze the results. The assessments should be given on a scheduled basis across team members' classrooms, and then an assigned team member is put in charge of putting the results together to forward to the team members to take a detailed look into how students did with each question and each student individually. And then finally, step 6, celebrate strengths and identify and implement improvement strategies. Celebrate what was done properly. Don't forget about that. But also, each team member should address at least one area for improvement in their given classroom and collectively come up with ways for improvement. Now, before delving into some specific schools' approaches, it is important to understand that these changes didn't happen overnight. Implementing the proper system to address what is going wrong in a school and why students aren't learning takes time, often years. Oftentimes, the schools learn through trial and error. Not every idea was perfect the first time they implemented it. Also, plans don't always last. One year the plan might be perfect, but between each different set of students or set of teachers for each school, the best plan is going to be different and therefore needs to be re-evaluated. And more importantly, no professional learning community support system and plan is going to make up for bad teaching. Each teacher part of the PLC must be proficient and determined in order to properly take advantage of the plan laid out. Boone's Mill Elementary School in Virginia is the first school that we're going to look at. After receiving repeated lack of proficiency in state assessments, this elementary school knew it had to change. In the year 2000, teachers decided to dive into the world of professional learning communities. First, they all had to get on the same realistic page. They had to discuss the reality of their poor test scores and what was wrong with their current way of teaching. My goal through the story of this school is to show things that were meant to be helpful, but in reality weren't helping. First, since there was no professional learning community, individual teachers were responding to unlearning students in very different ways. There wasn't a single collective method to help students, but instead whatever that particular teacher had the time and resources for, with no help from the actual school. The only students receiving extra help and resources during the school day were those part of the special education program or who had IEPs in place. No other students who were simply struggling got any special attention from teachers in core subject areas during the school day, only if they reached out for help outside of the school hours. Thirdly, the outside school help was volunteer based. So it was for teachers who felt that it was necessary or had the time for their students, and for students themselves who actually wanted to reach out for the help. No one was encouraging students to get help, and no one was encouraging teachers to provide extra support or extra incentives. Fourth, the school had no human resources department for struggling teachers. The only option was to go to other teachers for help if you found yourself struggling. And the last thing that they decided was that in-class assessments were limited, random, and untimely. And as I said earlier, that they should be regular. That brings me to the next school who had much success from a district-wide professional learning community, Cinco Ranch High School in Houston, Texas. Through this district's PLC, Cinco Ranch decided a necessary course of action was to properly integrate incoming freshmen into the new high schools. They thought this was the foundation of a successful high school experience. Each spring, principals of the sending middle school sent over reports of students that they identified as needing extra help and would continue to need extra help at the high school level. The identified students were offered a skills course to take during 8th grade school year to help prepare them for high school. And the school year also begins with a freshman-only orientation day. This is a day where only freshmen are on campus, and they're guided by upperclassmen mentors around the campus to their teachers, to their lockers, and so on. This gives them a day to adjust before facing the real thing. Along this idea of properly integrating freshmen, all freshmen are required to make one of the 7 courses a day at study hall to give them time to catch up on work and get out of their heads for a period. Through the professional learning community, it was noted that student involvement was crucial for a successfully run school. So over the years, they have developed over 60 clubs, and over 85% of the students are involved in one or more of the clubs. So it is evident through the school that common issues can be fixed to the extreme to provide a better experience for students. After Sanger School District in California was placed in an improvement program by the state, Superintendent Mark Johnson opted to make some changes and improvement for his district on his own through becoming a professional learning community. He made 4 concrete points that everyone must know and agree on in the professional learning community. First, the job of every person in the district is to ensure student learning. Second, hoping that things will get better is not a strategy. Third, don't blame the kids. And fourth, the best strategy for sustained substantive improvement is developing our capacity to work as members of a professional learning community. The PLC confronted 3 major issues. First, teachers were not clear on what students were to learn. Not enough attention had been paid to ensuring teachers had studied and clarified essential standard for the course or grade level. Second, the district had no process for monitoring student learning on a timely basis, and hoping for good results at the end of the year on state assessments had not proven to be an effective strategy for helping all students develop proficiency. Third, schools lacked any coherent sense as to how they should respond when students did not learn. Since just realizing the issues isn't enough, here are some examples of how the issues were addressed. Johnson insisted that teachers create a plan to help kids outside of the school day. Students who were struggling to a certain extent were required to find the time to get extra help rather than just go voluntarily. In some elementary schools, the use of student teachers, college students, and other volunteers were greatly used. Paraprofessionals and student education teachers would help those that needed extra help, as well as the lead teacher. And volunteers would help the students that were ready to move forward to help them deepen their learning until everyone was ready for the next lesson. One middle school used a program that they called ratification. Students that were failing or expected to fail had to go to homework labs during their lunch period to ratify their issues. Once fixed, they could then go back to their normal lunch, and if they exceeded beyond average, they could even have the opportunity to get extended lunch periods. Some students really took to this idea and voluntarily helped in the homework labs to tutor their classmates to help get them back on track. All of this was thanks to becoming a professional learning community rather than just individualized teaching and schooling. After completing this book, there were a few common characteristics that I noticed that professional learning communities had. Those are: one, having a clear purpose in place and instruction on how to achieve that purpose. Two, having a collaborative culture where everyone is willing to work together to better the education of students. Three, being able to assess the reality of your current situation and look into how to have a better practice. Four, having the drive to take action. Five, being determined and committed to getting the intended results. Six, being able to focus on the results that are found, good or bad. Seven, being made of strong leaders who inspire others. Eight, the willingness to face adversity, conflict, and anxiety. And then nine, being able to persevere in the face of obstacles. The education system is a constantly changing place and is constantly going to need reform to bring it up to date with the most beneficial education systems and styles happening. So I agree with the authors of Raising the Bar and Closing the Gap that one of the most positive and successful reforms that can take place right now is making the schooling system a professional learning community. There needs to be concrete rules and plans for the education system. Each teacher can't just be given a list of what they need to teach that year and just wing it, so to speak. There needs to be meetings on how to plan properly, how to teach, and what to do if the learning isn't happening. And these meetings need to be happening. They need to keep happening and be reevaluated along the way. Formative assessments need to be given and analyzed with each student in mind to ensure proficiency all around. Well, I think that having all teachers on the same page and working together is a great thing. I can see where it could feel limiting. Teaching is an art. Everyone has their own methods on what works best for them to teach what they are supposed to be teaching. And with such strict guidelines in place, it can be hard to simply be yourself as a teacher in the classroom. But if executed properly, I think that the guidelines can be strict enough to ensure student learning is happening while still allowing teachers to create their own environments in their own classrooms. Determination and willpower is key when in a public learning community, and I sincerely believe that this book would be beneficial to all educators. And thank you to the authors for putting together such a thoughtful piece of work and truly caring about the world of education. So thank you guys for watching.